G'day. My name's Greg and the surname is Jesniewski. It's a 13-letter Polish name, and when you tell people the first letter's R and then the second letter's Z, they go, oh, how do we deal with that? So Jesniewski. And I'm also known as Greg Full Moon, so two words, Greg Full Moon on Facebook. And I've been in New Zealand for about 20 years and have been part of a small environment group called the Renewables in the Motueka area, started by a couple of grandmas, and we were very concerned about climate change. And when we came to look at Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, or Trans-Pacific Partnership, because it hasn't been agreed yet, TPP, or some people refer to it as TPPA, we were very concerned about how government was going to be enabled to legislate in the public interest in respect to climate change and how we would be able to limit carbon emissions. But before I go into all of that, it's important that we understand what Trans-Pacific Partnership is. It's a trade and investment agreement that's being negotiated between 12 countries spread around the Pacific, including New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, Brunei, Vietnam, Malaysia, Japan, and across on the American continent, Canada, USA, Mexico, Chile and Peru. And it's actually New Zealand that is the administrator of the agreement, and it has invited a number of countries in to these negotiations. And the negotiations in respect to the TPP started in 2010 and have been going on for 5 years. The most recent negotiating round was in Hawaii on the island Maui, and people would be aware that at that meeting there wasn't a settlement or a final settlement reached despite the expectation that had been built around it. The TPP concerns itself with a number of different matters and contains, we are told, 29 chapters. However, only 5 of those relate to trade, as in how much or how easily it is to get our product from New Zealand into an overseas market, and what are the tariffs or lack of tariffs that would apply to that. A number of the matters that are concerned in TPP relate to what's called behind the border matters, and these go to how much we're going to pay for medicines, or how much we're going to pay for movies and downloads, and how much our books are going to cost us, and it has these, because the world is moving increasingly to a digital marketplace and digital technology is central to the economy. The people who own the rights to that, if they can lock up those rights so that other people can't access the material cheaply or easily, means that people are being loaded up with more costs. This is coming out in respect to the amount that we will be paying for our medicines. And particularly with Farm Act, one of the things that for instance, the American corporations don't like is the fact that we have what they call socialised medicine, and our Farm Act they see as a monopolistic force, and it's problematic for them in terms of their pharmaceutical companies being able to gouge out and make lots of profits in New Zealand. So Farm Act's been doing a good job saving us quite a lot of money. There's all sorts of figures for how much it's saved us over our life, and its annual budget is about $700 million in terms of the amount of medicines that it purchases. If medicines cost more, then Farm Act is either going to have to find more money to purchase the same number of medicines, or someone's going to have to, or we're going to have less medicines being purchased, and that's all going to be problematic for people who are the beneficiaries of Farm Act's medical buying, in that they will have to probably pay more for their health insurance, or it's going to have to pay more for subscriptions, or or somehow they're going to have to purchase medicines outside of the Pharmac model just through, because that treatment's no longer covered by Pharmac. And we've got figures now that say that based on what we understand that's being negotiated in the TPP, it's likely that we will be paying, New Zealand will be paying collectively an extra $1 billion over the next 10 years for our medicines. In respect to the so-called beneficial side, where trade is liberalised, New Zealand went free trade largely back in the 1980s. And as a result of our liberalisation of our trade, we were expecting that the rest of the world was also going to liberalise theirs. Well, surprise, surprise, they didn't. And we've got less bargaining chips now compared to some of the other nations, except for Singapore, who's also very free trade. So when we're negotiating with the USA or Canada or Japan in respect to access of their products into New Zealand versus New Zealand's products into those countries, we don't have too many bargaining chips. And they are not offering us very much in this in terms of increased access, tariff-free access, for our products into their markets. And so from that point of view, TPP, just on the basis of the numbers, doesn't stack up. There's a number of other things where it's going to limit our sovereignty or cause our governments to be scared about legislating in the public interest, which are very problematic. And the best example of that would be the smoke-free 2025 commitment that the national government worked out with the Maori Party arising from their 2011 election deal. That legislation has gone to the House and it's had its first reading, but they've parked the legislation and stopped it. And the government is saying, well, we're doing that because we're concerned about what the Philip Morris investor-state dispute settlement case against Australia, what is the implications of that? ISDS, investor-state dispute settlement. That is where a corporation can sue a government because the government has made a decision or introduced a regulation or legislation which they say expropriates or takes away from their profitability or somewhat limits their investment. And in the case of Philip Morris versus Australia, Australia has likewise gone plain packaging of their cigarettes in 2012. They carried the legislation, and Philip Morris has said, well, that's going to cost us, that's going to limit our profitability, we're suing you for billions of dollars. That case has been dragging on for quite a while, and our government has now said, well, we're not going to proceed with our smoke-free 2025 legislation until we see the outcome of that case. And that could be another couple of years. So in the meantime, our youngsters are still getting sexy advertising from the tobacco industry, as opposed to having plain packaging on our tobacco products as well. So in this sense, we see, without us even being in a TPP type agreement, that our government is unwilling to upset the large corporate interests. This is very problematic in a democracy and is obviously limiting our sovereign ability to do the right thing. Cheers. Dairy is a big issue for New Zealand, and there's an expectation that out of Trans-Pacific Partnership we will get more dairy product into overseas markets. So the key markets that are of interest are the USA, Canadian and Japanese markets. Now the USA is now as competitive as the New Zealand dairy farmer, and they're actually in surplus and are dumping their product on the ground. Also, Canada has a domestic market for their dairy where they have a quota system and they protect their dairy industry. If we force liberalisation on the Canadians, that is the New Zealand plus the Americans gang up and force liberalisation on the Canadians, then the result of that is predicted to result in the Canadians having to step it up, move away from their quota system, and then they will be, like the Americans, become a competitive dairy manufacturer, and they will be then looking to export their surplus, adding to the worldwide glut. And so there is a bit of a problem in this liberalisation question, particularly now because of the glut in dairy prices, but also like in pushing liberalisation, like that which has happened with the US dairy producers or farm producers. The Canadians are likely to become another competitor looking to place dairy into the global marketplace. Now, it is true that New Zealand's the world's population is going to grow, but it's not going to grow at such a rate that it's going to be absorbed the production that's coming online that's now anticipated in the global market. So there doesn't appear to be any ability to get increased access for our dairy producers into overseas markets. So holding up dairy in TPP as a big benefit, to me, seems to be a big lie. TPP Action is a free association of individuals throughout New Zealand, and we're in many of the centres of New Zealand. Currently we're in Hamilton, where this is being filmed, and we're working there to get local government in the Waikato area to adopt a particular 12-point resolution which protects New Zealand's public interest. The resolution itself came out of Auckland City Council in 2012, December 2012, where they were considering TPP. And if people might recall that in December 2012, the TPP negotiators were in Auckland, and Auckland TPP Action people got very involved, and there was protests in the streets outside of the venue for the TPP negotiators meeting. Anyway, this resolution that came out of Auckland Council sets out the public interest that we would want to protect in Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. So it says that local governments will not be limited in the amounts that they can, the amount that they can procure from the local economy, as opposed to competitive tendering and allowing overseas investors to, to make or provide council services. The resolution also says that we retain the Treaty of Waitangi as an integral part, because it would appear that the treaty is under a threat, and that's the reason why Maori interests have taken their particular case to the Waitangi Tribunal. It would also protect our labour laws, our environmental laws, and make sure that Farmac is protected. So it's got 12 points, and the 12th point is that the treaty has to be negotiated in full sight of the public, and that we're fully informed with what goes on before the government agrees with it. Now, that resolution was carried by a slender majority by the Auckland Council, and then it was conveyed to Nelson by Professor Jane Kelsey. And the people in Nelson said, oh, that's a good idea, and they pushed that onto their council in Nelson. And then we, as part of the renewables, then took up the lobby to the Tasman District Council, and they in March of 2014 also adopted the resolution. So then we had 3 councils. And then in quick succession in August, Christchurch and Dunedin councils also carried the resolution. And then working in the North Island, we got in early 2015, the Wellington City Council, the Hutt City Council, the Upper Hutt City Council, Kapiti Coast District Council, Palmerston North City Council, and also on the 23rd of June 2015, Tauranga City Council have all carried that same 12-point resolution. And those councils are some of the larger councils, and they, in their territories, represent 60% of the New Zealand population based on the 2013 census figures. Now we're working with councils and TPP Action groups in a number of other areas, and like I said at the start, we're currently working with the Waikato councils, and on Tuesday the 11th of August we made our initial approach to the Waikato Regional Council, and it appeared that they seemed reasonably supportive, and so we'll know a little bit more as that council considers it through the end of August and into September. So this is a way that TPP Action groups or concerned citizens can get involved in their democracy, and also how they can take that up with their governance structures through their local governments and get their local governments engaged in what TPP means for them. And this is one strategy that TPP Action has adopted around New Zealand. So TPP, what else can we do about it? Well, each person has to investigate it and look at it for themselves. So one way is to go to the It's Our Future website, so itsourfuture.org.nz, and you can research TPP. There's lots of news items and resources on that website that you can look at, including our local government campaign. Click on that link. Also, just Google TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, and there will be lots and lots of different articles and interests that you can read in respect to it. And it seems to be getting a fair amount of press now in August with the lead up to the National Week of Action that's taking place around New Zealand. So in this week there will be rallies and actions at something like 20 different centres around New Zealand, culminating with actions on Saturday the 15th of August. On the 12th of August in Parliament at 12 o'clock there was 500 or 600 people present at the council, at the Parliament, making presentations to the parliamentarians about, and they presented petitions. They also informed the Parliament about the local government campaign, and included in the petitions and condemnations are doctors, lawyers, medical people, unions, people from all walks of civil society. And they have combined in the struggle around TPP over quite a few years. So there's been 3 or 4 national actions now, most recently March 7 of 2015, and in November 8 of last year, where each of those have saw 10,000 people combined get out on the streets to protest TPP, asking for government to release the text and inform us what they're doing. And this, and now in August, the Week of Action is attempting to raise the energy around the opposition to TPP. Because TPP appears to our plain reading to be a corporate rights agreement rather than something that's looking after the human rights of the public majority. That's a real problem. And we encourage people to make sure that they get out in their centres. So it doesn't matter whether you're in Hokianga or Invercargill. It doesn't matter whether you're in Napier or in Nelson. Each of those centres, including the major ones, Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, Dunedin, are all having rallies at their at places in their city centres and wanting lots and lots of people to turn out. We're hoping many, many thousands of people turn out on the 15th of August, Saturday the 15th of August. Hope to see you there, and if you're in Hamilton, come along. I'll be talking to that rally then. Cheers.